Okay, yeah, there we're live. So, just before I started recording, I wanted to ask you about your boxing background. You told me that you were never going professional, but you had this love for the sport. Where did this start? Please tell me about that.
It, excuse me, it started in my childhood. I'm 50 years old. And so my main memories of really getting into boxing as a fan and watching it are from the 80s. And I know that a lot of us tend to do this. My dad did this. Guys his age did this with baseball, which I know probably not too popular where you live, but they always
Mm,
thought the guys from their era were the best, and they were better than guys from our era. But I remember growing up as a kid my age, kind of coming of age, getting introduced to sports and paying attention to it in the 80s. I watched probably the first fight I remember watching is Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor. And that became obviously very controversial with Panama Lewis mixing the telling the corner, get the bottle I mixed right before Pryor came alive in the 13th or 14th round and knocked out Arguello. But it was Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello and Roberto Duran and my favorite fighter ever, Marvin Hagler, and Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns. And that's really when my love for the sport started. Um, you know, I didn't come from I came from a middle class home. Um, in the U.S. boxing, most people who get into boxing um, as children are from more working class and underprivileged backgrounds. And my
mm,
parents being college educated, middle class folks, boxing was not something that was really ever a possibility for me. Especially nice little Jewish boys don't in America don't become boxers. But I had a love for the sport, and I used my allowances and money I earned from jobs around the neighborhood to buy pay-per-views. And fast forward into the 90s, I got introduced to I watched UFC 1 and 2 on a VHS tape in 1994, and I got into that, and I just kind of continued. As a fan. I did a little bit of training little over 20 years ago with a coach, but work and life got in the way. And then
mm,
after spending a few years doing jujitsu and suffering a knee injury, I reconnected with a friend of mine who's a coach, and I started training with him, and that's where my kids we train at that gym now. And I mean that's my personal experience with boxing. But I first got involved in the business side of it about 10 years ago. A friend of mine,
mm,
Diego, who was at the time was in the position I'm in now. He was one of a handful of commissioners in the state of New Mexico for the New Mexico Athletic Commission, and we regulate all of the professional combat sports in the state, professional boxing, professional and amateur mixed martial arts, and also professional wrestling. Uh, he asked me, he said, "Hey, I know you're into this stuff. Do you want to do some work?" Sure. The geography of the state of New Mexico is such that the capital is in Santa Fe, which is about 300, a little more than 300 miles north of me, and Albuquerque is the biggest city, and Albuquerque is where most of the events happen. But the promoters have to pay the officials, the referees, the timekeeper, the judges, the deputy inspectors, and when they have to travel, the promoters have to pay them more. So they're always looking for people, for example, in Las Cruces, where I live, to get involved because they can help out the promoters by not having to pay us the travel costs. So I said, sure. I got involved, and for about 8 years, I was a deputy inspector, which the way I always explain it to people is whenever you watch a professional fight, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts, um, you see the guy with the suit who walks the fighter to the cage or the ring and goes in and out in between rounds. That's what a deputy inspector is. But of course, the job of the deputy inspector is a lot more involved. We get there about 3 hours before bell time. We check the fighters in, take them for their physicals with the doctor. Have to check their bags to make sure they don't have anything in the locker room they're not supposed to have. Which and they can't have anything with caffeine. Um, they cannot have B12, which means they can have Gatorade, but not Powerade. They can bring in their own water bottles, but we have to make sure that they're not open. The seal hasn't been broken. You can't obviously can't have any drugs or alcohol. And then,
Yeah.
the main thing is staying with the fighters until they're fighting. And we have to know all the rules on hand wraps. And we monitor the hand wraps and we sign off on those. We have a Sharpie and we get the gloves from the promoter. And uh, we have to inspect the gloves. We have to watch them being put on. And then the last thing we'll sign off on before the fighter goes out is if you look in most places in the U.S., overseas not so much, but in any professional fight, there's a red corner and a blue corner, which means that all the fighters that are going to be in the red corner are in the red locker, and all the fighters in the blue corner are going to be in the blue locker. In the United States, with the exception of Nevada and I think one or two other states that I've seen, if you look at the wrist, on boxing gloves, it would be over the laces, and on MMA gloves, it would be over the Velcro, the strap that Velcros them on. You'll see blue or red duct tape. We'll put
Okay.
the duct tape over that and then sign with our Sharpie. And then, on a typical, say it's a 12 fight card, we have four deputy inspectors per locker room. Each of us will walk out four fighters for their fights. And that's what I did for about 8 years. Lots of weekends, lots of driving. Um, Sometimes you drive 4 hours, work 6 or 7 hours, and then drive 4 hours home, or you stay overnight and spend your per diem on a hotel. But
Yeah.
back in August of 2022, I was actually at home. My whole family were home. Uh, we had tested positive for COVID, and I got a call on my cell phone. And of course, I didn't recognize the number. Most of us, if you don't recognize the number, you don't answer. But it said it was from Santa Fe, which is the state capital. And I figured,
Mm.
okay, I'll answer it. I'll see what's up. Hi, this is so and so from the governor's office. Somebody nominated you to sit on the athletic commission and be a commission member. I thought, wow, that's a pretty big deal. So I went through the process and I got my appointment, and that's what I've really been doing for the last year and a half or so.
And what's the big difference in I would say, in the job description between the inspector and the commissioner then?
Well, the number one difference is I don't get paid anymore. This is kind of an honor, and it really is. And I'm having an opportunity to do things and meet people and be involved in things that I didn't before. I get reimbursed for my travel, but this is very interesting for me because it's management. And in
Mm.
my, I'll put air quotes, my day job, my profession, I'm a sheriff's detective. And, I've been in law enforcement for 25 years and I've never taken a promotional exam. I have no desire to be a
Oh.
supervisor. I'm a kind of a boots on the ground guy. I like to work cases and that's what I like to do. So I've never been involved in shot calling or management of any sort. And so this is
Mm.
different. And to be honest, the vast majority of what we do as commissioners is at our monthly meeting, we will approve permits and licenses. For example, if a boxing promoter or an MMA promoter wants to throw an event, they want to have a boxing fight, a boxing card or MMA card or event. The first thing they need obviously is a promoter's license, which now costs $500 for the year. And we approve a lot of those in January for obvious reasons. But once they submit their promoter's license, what they'll do is they also pay a fee for an event permit. And that's just a form. You check a few boxes that says, this is the type of event I'm throwing. It's boxing or MMA or kickboxing or wrestling. And they'll list the name of the venue that they're going to use and the date and so on and so forth. And then the rest of the packet, which we get a few days beforehand to review, consists of they have to have a main event contracts. They don't have to submit the rest of the card for all the fights to be approved until a little bit later. But they have to have the promoter's license, the event permit, the main event contract, the venue contract. They have to have proof of their bonding company. They have to have an insurance policy for each and every fighter up to a certain amount. They have to have a security contract showing that the venue has security. Uh, they have to have an ambulance contract. And once all those things are in and everything's in order, we'll vote at the meeting on that. And that's really the meat of what we do. Um, we also do things if people want to apply to be a judge or apply to be a referee and get their license for that. We'll approve those. And a lot of times it's somebody from another state who wants to start working in New Mexico, in which case, we have a lot of resources. we can use to kind of check the work that they've done. In boxing, there's a website called BoxRec. And you can go on any fighter who's ever had a professional fight, or any referee who's ever refereed a professional fight, or any judge who's judged a professional fight. Everything that they've done will be on there. So you can check and see if what kind of experience they have, if they ever been disciplined, if they have their license suspended or canceled or anything like that. We also hear complaints. The first, I think one of the first events I attended as a commissioner was Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships. Actually, has found a comfort zone here in New Mexico. They really like coming to New Mexico, and we have a number of shows a year. And at that fight, at that event, the co-main event was between a native Las Cruces, actually, somebody who's very well known in my town, Austin Trout, who was a former WBA 154-pound boxing champion. He fought Diego Sanchez, who is very well known for being on The Ultimate Fighter. I think he won The Ultimate Fighter. He's a UFC veteran. And they fought each other. And there was a complaint filed because there's video of Austin Trout's corner greasing him up, not just on the face, but on the shoulders, which is something that's done in boxing, not in mixed martial arts for obvious reasons. And Diego felt that Diego got bested. He got TKO'd in the third round. And, he really didn't touch Austin for a lot of reasons. Austin was a former world champion boxer. He's very slick and very elusive. And Diego fought, he filed a complaint about Austin having an unfair advantage. And, we had to address that. And at the end of the day, we read the complaint, we looked at our rules, and there's actually, at this time, there is no wording in the unified rules of bare knuckle fighting that even addresses grease. So that's something we're in the process of addressing in our own rule set. But we get complaints about a guy doesn't like that the judge ended the fight, or any number of things. Somebody who tests positive for drugs may have an issue with the way the drug test was administered, and that's a lot of what we do. We also travel. Last year we were in Las Vegas, Nevada, for about 5 days at the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports convention, where we do a lot of yearly seminars. There's the judges seminar training. There's the boxing judges and MMA judges trainings. There's the boxing referee and MMA referee trainings. And people can renew their registry with the ABC. We also, during the convention portion, we hear speakers. Actually, last year was my first convention. And we heard a very interesting presentation by a member of the Association of Ringside Physicians, putting out, it was before it was published, but talking about their position paper on transgender athletes competing against cisgender athletes in combat sports. And that was obviously very informative. We also took a vote, and I had the opportunity to vote as part of my delegation from New Mexico on accepting the unified rule set for bare knuckle fighting. At the time, only 13 states were sanctioning bare knuckle fighting, and now that we've adopted an actual unified rule set like we have for mixed martial arts and boxing, more states are starting to bring BKFC or bare knuckle fighting on. And so, that's a lot of what we do. I had the pleasure of traveling to Orlando, Florida in December for the World Boxing Association convention. In a few weeks, several of us, a couple of our judges, a couple of our referees, and I, and our executive director are going to San Juan, Puerto Rico for the IBF convention. So it's just, and that's a lot of networking and again, going to seminars and attending rankings meetings, and championship committee meetings and things like that.
Okay. That's actually a mouthful, but now I have a few questions. And the first one is, you talked earlier about the caffeine and the vitamin B12 that isn't allowed. What exactly is the regulation on that? Why isn't it allowed? What's happening with that?
On caffeine?
Caffeine and the vitamin B12 that you talked about earlier.
Because they're considered, synthetic stimulants.
Okay.
We don't want people having an unfair edge, and also it's a health issue. You can take a bunch of caffeine and speed your heart rate up. I'll give you an example, actually. Right before I was appointed to the commission, we worked a boxing event, and there was a fighter, um, big, huge heavyweight who lives in Texas, and he was actually assigned to the locker room I was assigned to, and I saw a large can of what they call pre-workout. A lot of weightlifters take it, and it's mostly caffeine and
Okay.
stimulants. And I said, "Who the hell let this in the locker room? You can't have this." And they said, "Oh, that's so and so's." And I said, "Well, look, we gotta get it out of here. We can't. We're not allowed to." Anyway, so I took it out of there, and I noticed that this fighter was really hopped up. I mean, he was really obvious. He was very caffeinated, and
Mm.
unfortunately for him, we couldn't prove that he had taken anything, and somebody let it in, so wasn't much we could do. But unfortunately for him, there was a delay in getting an ambulance and paramedics to the venue, and we can't have any fights until we have a paramedic there with an ambulance. And so it was delayed, and it
Yeah.
was delayed, and it was delayed. And I noticed that the longer we waited, the less energy he had. And by the time that his fight came,
Okay.
he was crashing, and he actually took a knee a couple times. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's why you can't have caffeine. It can give you an unfair edge. And at the end of the day, everything that we do when it comes to regulating mixed martial arts and boxing or any combat sport is about fighter safety and athlete safety, and making sure that look, there are inherent risks. Obviously, the whole point is to hurt the other guy. But there are inherent risks to this. But our goal is to make it as safe as possible for our participants.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about was when you had to vote on certain things, like you just mentioned the transgender, the cisgender, that whole voting portion about on that. How did that work? What's the process on putting it on the table, getting it out there, and then having a lot of people to vote on it? What's the process on that?
Well, this wasn't something that was actually voted on. There is no the ABC, the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports, to my knowledge, does not have an official position on it. This was a presentation, kind of an educational thing that was put on by a representative of, like I said, there's a separate body we work with called the Association of Ringside Physicians, and it was basically their position paper. That wasn't something that was voted on. It was just kind of informative. I can see that I can see in the future the ABC um, adding that to our unified rule set or taking an official position on it, but we don't have one yet, or the ABC doesn't have one yet. I don't say we because I'm not a member of the, I'm participate, but I'm not
Mm.
part of the ABC. Um, now, what we did vote on was accepting a unified rule set for bare knuckle fighting, and I'll go a little bit further. Something that I expect very much for us to vote on this year is amending the unified rule set for mixed martial arts with regard to how a defendant, how we define a down fighter. We realize that in some places in Asia they don't have this rule, but in the unified rules of mixed martial arts, you cannot kick or knee strike to the head of a grounded opponent. And currently, what's considered a grounded opponent is basically any part of the body touching the floor or the canvas other than the bottom of the feet. And in the past,
Okay.
people would put their fingertips down and they would play that little game of, oh, my fingertips are down, you can't. And then now they're up, now they're down, now they're up. They changed that to a flat palm. I don't know what the proposal is going to be, but I do know in the last couple of months, Andy Foster, who is the executive director of the California State Athletic Commission, and who is widely, almost universally regarded as the most influential person in combat sports with regard to the regulatory side of it, has talked a little bit about wanting to address that. So I would be, and he's also the chairman of the rules committee for the ABC. So I have a very strong feeling that's something that we're going to discuss heavily and probably vote on this summer.
Okay. Okay. And and I want to go a bit off topic about a few things that came to my attention the last few weeks, and that was the involvement of match fixing in boxing matches. If I'm not mistaken, in the 70s and the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. What do you know about that? What did you think about that?
That's something that if you're a boxing fan at all, it's been on your mind. Like I said, I'm 50 years old and I've lived through, um, seen a lot of fights. Everybody has an opinion on who should have won, of course. Look, the reputation, the boxing business has a reputation for being slightly dirty. I say slightly is a little bit of an understatement. You know, one of the reasons, I'll go a step further, and I talked about the primary reason we're involved in the regulatory side of things, and the reason we do regulate and have sanctioning bodies is to try to weed this stuff out and avoid this stuff. Um, I have not been, in the position I'm in long enough to have had to address something like that. But I think that everybody knows that uh, there's a widely held perception that that goes on. I don't think it's a secret that that is a history. There's a history of that in the sport. But I think that when you get more regulation and better regulation, you severely decrease the odds that something like that's going to happen. Um, and things can always be investigated further. What promoters do behind closed doors, you know, anybody can guess what that's about, and how you regulate that. And I know that there's the all kinds. There was a federal act in the United States that was called the Muhammad Ali Act that helped bring all the commissions together and regulate things further and address some of that stuff. But I really can't tell you. I have not had personal. I've not had the opportunity. Fortunately, I've not had the need to address anything like that in our state. There have not been
Mm.
any allegations brought to us. And beyond that, I really can't. It's hard for me to comment on something that we haven't addressed. I can only say what we've done in our state, New Mexico, and that's not been an issue in the short time that I've been in the position I'm in.
Okay, and then the next thing is the whole thing of the celebrity boxing that's coming around, that's doing the whole, I would say, the whole uh, what do you call it, going the distance of all the celebrities that are going to boxing, KSI, the Bulls, and especially now with Mike Tyson involved. What do you think about that?
Huh. I have an ever-evolving opinion on that. At the end of the day, boxing's a business, and if you can sell a fight, that's what you do. If you can get people to buy tickets, and if you can get people to stream, and if you get somebody to put it on pay-per-view, then people are going to do it. And if somebody can make a buck, that's what they're going to do. I'm a little too old to know who a lot of these YouTube stars are. I mean, if I haven't seen them in the celebrity boxing, I don't know who they are. I heard a very good description on a podcast. I don't remember which one it was, but it was a discussion among people who are a hell of a lot more knowledgeable and have a hell of a lot more experience in this business than I do. And with regard to somebody like Jake Paul and his winning fights, they brought up a good point. And somebody said, look, he's not fighting boxers, he's fighting MMA stars. He's fighting, and they're old and washed up. He's fighting other YouTubers. And somebody brought up a point, and this is really true. Anytime you have a prospect in the pros in boxing who has a good and legitimate amateur pedigree, um, they don't fight competitive fights. The first 10 fights or so are handpicked. Um, a lot of the coaches and promoters want you to fight somebody who's rangy, somebody who fights in the pocket, somebody you want you to fight a southpaw or two. They want you to fight a banger, somebody has a lot of power, and kind of expose you to a lot of different things. So the fact that Jake Paul has not fought a legitimate boxer with high level potential is really no different than what a lot of boxers who are expected to be good have done. Now, once he starts fighting legitimate cruiserweights, we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't even remember who he was. It Tommy Fury he lost to? I don't remember. I do have some concerns um, about granting licenses to aging fighters, people like Mike Tyson, who's 56 years old, 57 years old,
Mm.
however old he is. He may be in fantastic shape for his age, but I think there are a lot of concerns. And you know what? Some promotions actually have extra safeguards. Bare knuckle fighting championships requires for anybody 40 years or older to get an MRI and an EKG before they allow them to fight. So there are measures being taken. I don't even know where this fight's supposed to take place and what commission is overseeing it. But I guess one of the good things is New Mexico's not we're not a heavily populated state. We're not very densely populated, and the likelihood that we're going to get one of these big type of fights that somebody's going to want to throw them here is pretty low. So it's not something that I'm going to ever have to vote on. But that's always a concern. I have a concern. We're talking about aging fighters and their hearts and their heads and things like that. I would have a lot of concern about them participating in things like that, or at least allowing them to.
Okay, and on that same note, on the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, have you seen the rules of the fight? Have you seen what they discussed it and all of that? The fact that it's only 2 minute rounds and that they're going to use 16-ounce gloves. Have you seen that?
I have I didn't realize they were only going to be 2 minute rounds. Maybe I heard something about that, but the 16-ounce gloves is pretty significant. That's the training size glove.
Mm,
One of the things in professional boxing is we use 8-ounce gloves for any weight up to 153.9 pounds, and anything at 154 pounds and over is 10-ounce gloves. So the fact that they're going to be fighting with 16-ounce gloves really says something. And to go back to what I was talking about, our number one priority is fighter safety, and the concerns I have about somebody Mike Tyson's age fighting. It's obvious that whatever commission is working with the promoters to put these rules, put this rule set together, has that in mind. The 2 minute rounds is also something. My other understanding is it's not going to be judged by professional judges, or there will be no official scores. It is purely an exhibition. So it sounds to me like
okay,
people are taking, again, there are inherent risks in combat sports. The idea is to hurt the other guy. But
okay,
they're taking, it sounds to me like they're taking um, steps to mitigate to the greatest possible degree unnecessary or excessive injury or risk to the fighters.
okay. And you really think that the fact that it's going to be shorter rounds and heavier gloves, that the fighter safety is going to be a lot better, and that the fighter safety is more looked after?
And I'm sorry, that last part.
I was asking if the 2 minute rounds as well as the heavier gloves, is it really going to be significant? Is it going to have a significant impact on the fighter safety? Is it going to make the fights safer? Or what's your opinion on that?
The size of the gloves, something that people need to understand is the reason we wear gloves primarily is to protect the hands of the fighters more so than it is to protect the bodies of the person getting hit. But I think when
Mm,
you're being punched with more padding, it does afford you a little bit more safety. To me, I really think that given Mike Tyson's age, I'm less concerned personally about his ability to absorb punishment than his ability to go, his cardio. So I think that the shorter rounds, to me, is probably um, the biggest measure of safety. And I have to say, I think it's a pretty good idea. And of all of the things that they're doing, that's probably the one thing that I see that would mitigate the risks to the greatest degree.
okay, that's positive. And I think on this note, I'm going to stop the recording. But before I stop recording, please tell me where can people listen to your podcast as well? Where can people see the work that you are doing? Please give me all of those information.
Okay, so my podcast, as you know, it's at Square Peg Podcast. Also, we're Square Peg Podcast on Facebook. We're available on uh, we're on Pandora, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. Let me just stop the recording that and go anywhere.